Betonline has released the win totals for the football season in 2022, both the NCAA and the SEC. Where does Tennessee fall in that mix? And a surprise at the top. We'll get into it today on a Tuesday Locked On Vols.
You are Locked On Vols, your daily podcast on the Tennessee Volunteers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey everybody, and happy Tuesday. Welcome to Locked On Vols, your team every single day. And I'm your host, Eric Kane. You can find this podcast at _Kaner on Twitter and at Locked On Vols. And it's your go-to Tennessee Volunteers podcast each and every single day. So I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Vols your first listen. And if you're new to the show, welcome to it. I do radio in Knoxville, Tennessee at 99.1 The Sports Animal, and also write for the rival site that covers Tennessee. That's volquest.com. Got a fun show getting in here today. We're going to go win totals in segment 1 from Betonline. In segment 2, Brad Crawford of 247 Sports releases top 20 quarterbacks entering the 2022 season. Does Hendon Hooker rank on that list? And if so, where? And of course, in segment 3, the Volunteers rack up some postseason awards, but as you can see from, well, if you're watching on YouTube, let me get away this lower third. As you can see from the sign behind me, somebody might have got snubbed for a major award. We'll get into that. That's your rundown here on a Tuesday show. So, BetOnline SEC win totals for the 2022 season. Tennessee, right off the bat, I'll tell you, it's at 7.5. I think that's a good number. I mean, I think most of us here are predicting 8 wins for the University of Tennessee. So if I was telling you right now a little betting advice, I would say take the over on this future. For the win totals at Tennessee at 7.5. In 2021, BetOnline had Tennessee at 6. So Tennessee obviously surpassed that by 1 with 7 in the regular season and nearly had an 8th win of the season, but of course fell in that Music City Bowl. So I think that's about right for the University of Tennessee. You look at that schedule, there's a couple of toss-up games. Pitt at Pitt, I think, is a toss-up game, but I do believe Tennessee should win that one. Florida will be a toss-up game. I believe Tennessee should win that one. LSU at Baton Rouge will be a toss-up game. That'll be tough for Tennessee, in my opinion. And then you got Kentucky that's a toss-up game. That'll be really challenging, but it's at Neyland Stadium. And really, maybe if you want to throw South Carolina in that mix, but I'm not even going to throw South Carolina in that mix. I think Tennessee should handle the Gamecocks even on the road. But you look at these, not guaranteed losses, but the losses that stare you in the face here just looking at the schedule. Right off the bat, I mean, LSU, I know I mentioned that as a toss-up game, but you're not going to win all those toss-up games. LSU and Baton Rouge, potentially with Brian Kelly, and I know it's a rebuilding year. That's a game Tennessee could, but that's going to be a tough place to play. So Tennessee could lose that one. Alabama, we go ahead and chalk that one up as a loss for this exercise. Georgia, for the sake of this exercise, we'll chalk it up as a loss. So, those are 2 to 3 games where you're saying, okay, well, Tennessee will probably lose those games. But if you take the over at 7.5, that means Tennessee's going to win 8 regular season games. That means there's going to be 4 losses, and that's typically just how football works out. Of those toss-up games, Pitt, Florida, LSU, Kentucky. I mean, South Carolina. Tennessee's not going to win every single one of those, right? Tennessee never does, and for the sake of any school for that matter, if you have that many toss-up games, you're not going to win those. Coming into the 2021 season, I said Missouri was a toss-up game. Tennessee got that dub. I said South Carolina was a toss-up game. Tennessee got that dub. I said Kentucky was a toss-up game. Tennessee got that dub. But it fell to Pittsburgh. Obviously, it fell to Georgia, Florida, and Alabama. And those were your 4 losses. And Ole Miss, which was not a toss-up game entering the season. And Tennessee fell to that one. So I think 7.5 is about right. I think that is a good starting spot for the University of Tennessee. And again, if I'm giving you any type of advice here, I'm telling you to take the over there because I think Tennessee can get to 8 regular season wins. We'll see about the 9 the more we know about this team entering fall camp, but I would say 8 right now is probably safe, so I would take the over there. You look at the rest of the SEC East, you've got Georgia at the top at 10.5. That means Vegas believes Georgia will take a loss on the season. Will it be 1 loss or will it be 2? You look at Georgia's schedule. Georgia opens up in Atlanta in the Mercedes-Benz Dome against Oregon. Potentially that could have been the loss. Georgia plays at Auburn on the Plains. That will probably not be a loss. Georgia plays the cocktail party, of course, against Florida. That will probably not be a loss. Tennessee hosts Tennessee this upcoming season. That could be a good game. Tennessee or Georgia against Mississippi State. It's Will Rogers. Georgia's a better football team, but you're playing a good quarterback. Probably the best quarterback on the schedule, in my opinion. A couple good ones. But you got that against Mississippi State, and then you've got Kentucky, and that'll be a tough game as well. So just like with Tennessee, I mean, you got some of these toss-up games. Kentucky, I don't want to say toss-up games, but challenging games for Georgia. Kentucky, Mississippi State, Tennessee, Oregon, South Carolina. I mean, Georgia's not going to win all of those games, right? Potentially, but Vegas believes Georgia will lose at least one game. The question is, will it lose one or two? And that's why the line's at 10.5. So in the SEC East, you got Georgia at 10.5. You got Tennessee at 7.5. Kentucky is at 7.5, and that's about on par because we believe Tennessee and Kentucky are about on the even playing field right now in terms of its rebuild. And of course, Tennessee got that win last year. So if you want to put the Tennessee Volunteers ahead of Kentucky, that's kind of how I did in my list for them. South Carolina at 6.5. They were picked to win only 4 games this time last year. Florida at 6.5, picked to win 9 games a season ago. Missouri at 5.5, picked to win 7 a year ago. And Vanderbilt at 2.5, picked to win 3 a year ago. So you look over at the SEC West. Alabama, much like Georgia, 10.5. A year ago, they were picked to win 11.5, or that the line was at 11.5, I should say. So it was a matter of, will Alabama go undefeated or will Alabama lose one game? This year, much like Georgia, Alabama, the line is 10.5. So, what game on the schedule will Alabama potentially lose? You look at that schedule, opens up against Utah State, at Texas, maybe that'll be a challenge. A couple of weeks later, at Arkansas, that'll be a challenge. Texas A&M at home on October 8th. Everybody's got that game circled. At Tennessee and Knoxville against Mississippi State. At LSU. At Ole Miss. They're rebuilding, but still. And then you've got the Iron Bowl at the end of the season against Auburn on November 26th. So which one of those teams are going to beat Alabama according to Vegas? If I'm circling it right now, I would probably say at Arkansas would be the game that they're talking about, or maybe at Texas A&M. But Alabama at 10.5 on the West. They were picked to, the line was at 11.5 last year. Texas A&M, 8.5 is what its line is this year for that total. It was picked to win 8 games a season ago. Arkansas, 7.5. It was picked, the line in 2021 entering the season was at 5.5, and they obviously surpassed expectations. Ole Miss at 7.5 as well. LSU, 6.5. The line entering the 2021 season was 8.5. Mississippi State's at 6.5. And Auburn is at 5.5. So, interesting things to talk about there. Tennessee second in the SEC East with the line at 7.5. Of course, tied with Kentucky at 7.5. Can Tennessee take sole place of the second place in the SEC East this year? We'll have to see. Georgia's going to come down, obviously. Georgia's losing a whole lot of talent to the NFL draft. You still have Stetson Bennett as your starting quarterback for now. Georgia will come down. Georgia will likely not win a national championship this year. So that gap will close a little bit. Can Tennessee continue its upward trajectory and kind of fill out there at second place in the SEC East? Florida's down this year, but they'll bounce back. Kentucky's still a solid program. Can Tennessee give Georgia a run for its money? What does Tennessee look like at this stage in the season? By the time Tennessee plays Georgia in Athens, Tennessee will have already played Kentucky, Alabama, LSU on the road, Florida, and Pittsburgh on the road. So it will have been battle-tested by that point in the season. And really, after that Georgia game, Tennessee's kind of coasting. It's got Missouri, South Carolina will be a challenge, and then Vanderbilt to finish out the regular season. So what are you thinking? Over? Under? If the line's at 7.5 for Tennessee, what are you taking? Over or under? I'm taking the over. I think that is a safe bet for the University of Tennessee. And this is from Betonline that released its win totals for the 2022 season on Monday afternoon. So, good stuff there. And never a dull time to go ahead and start putting in some of those future bets. Our partners at BetOnline continue to be the number one source for all your sports needs and sports information. Find all the latest odds, the news, sports developments, including this year's basketball playoffs, Major League Baseball scores, fights, and next season's NFL futures as well. We're talking college futures right now, but they've got the NFL futures as well. BetOnline, it's your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to esports to reality televisions to playoffs, even more than that. Head on over to the website today or check out your mobile device. Learn about all the latest trends and all the action. BetOnline, it is where the game starts. Guys, I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Vols your first listen each and every single day. Check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. The biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. Available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and of course, wherever you get your podcast. Looking at the futures, really. We talked about the BetOnline win totals for the University of Tennessee and the rest of the SEC. That was in segment 1. Now, let's look at the quarterback position entering the 2022 NCAA, really SEC season, if you want to call it that. And yeah, Brad Crawford Analyst over 247 Sports, he released his top 20 college football quarterbacks entering the 2022 season. You know, you got the standard top 3 up there. Bryce Young at number 1 of Alabama. C.J. Stroud of Ohio State's at number 2. Caleb Williams is this year. Spencer Rattler, and it's funny because he started last year as the backup quarterback. Neither one of those guys are in Norman anymore, but Caleb Williams at Southern Cal's at number 3. Then you get into Dillon Gabriel, meeting up with Jeff Lebby again. He's at Oklahoma. That makes some sense. KJ Jefferson coming in at number 5 of Arkansas. You guys know me. I like KJ Jefferson. I think he's a talented player, but he wouldn't be my pick for second behind Bryce Young in the SEC. The guy right behind KJ Jefferson in Brad Crawford's top 20 quarterback rankings would be my pick, and that would be Hendon Hooker. Hendon Hooker coming in at number 6 in terms of returning or the top quarterbacks available here for the 2022 season. So that's quite an accomplishment when you're talking about quarterbacks and the best ones around the country. Hendon Hooker not only in the top 10 in a lot of these rankings, but just outside the top 5 in this one at number 6. Grayson McCall at Coastal Carolina is number 7. Spencer Rattler, the legend continues, right? He's at number 8 for South Carolina. You have Devin Leary of North Carolina State at number 9, and Tyler Van Dyke of Miami is at number 10. Sam Hartman of Wake Forest is number 11. Let's see if he can replicate what he did last year. I have my concerns. You have Brennan Armstrong of Virginia at number 12. Cam Rising of Utah at number 13. And then there's my boy, Will Rogers. Mississippi State is at 14. And everybody's favorite quarterback from the SEC, the number 1 NFL draft pick for the blankety-blankety-blank in 2023, Will Levis, coming up here at number 15 overall, according to Brad Crawford. This goes to show you that Will Levis, according to this list, is the 15th best quarterback in college football entering this season, and some people at CBS Sports have him as the number 1 overall pick. Makes no sense to me, but I digress. Aiden O'Connell, Tennessee fans know exactly who that is, of Purdue. He's at number 16. Malik Cunningham of Louisville is at 17. You've got Quinn Ewers. Wow, yes, Quinn Ewers. The guy that committed to Ohio State, enrolled early, couldn't do his name, image, and likeness, transferred to Texas, still has not played a down in college football. And he is considered as the 18th best college quarterback entering the 2022 season. Again, I'm in the media. I'm a content creator. I do this stuff for a living. I don't get it. Quinn Ewers, he might be an All-American. Sure. He's not played a daggum snap in the NCAA. He hasn't played a snap. He hasn't thrown a football. He hasn't done a thing. Yet people want to, anoint him as the second coming. It's just baffling to me. But nonetheless, good for Quinn Ewers. He comes in at number 18 from Texas. Number 19, Jackson Dart, newcomer to the SEC from Southern Cal, now at Ole Miss. And then Anthony Richardson, who probably has the highest ceiling of any SEC quarterback, comes in at number 20. So what do you guys think about this? 8 quarterbacks from the SEC are on this list from Brad Crawford at 24/7 Sports. Bryce Young at number 1 of Alabama, number 5, KJ Jefferson, 6, Hendon Hooker. You could probably flip those if you ask me. Spencer Rattler at number 8. And again, here's my thing on Spencer Rattler. I don't think he's as bad as everybody thinks he is. I think he missed some wide open receivers. I think he turned the football over a little bit. I just think that it was an impossible situation for him at Oklahoma towards the end of it. But hey, you're coming to the SEC now, so it's not like it's going to get much easier, right? Don't look for relief coming to the SEC for Spencer Rattler. Will Rogers at number 14. I like Will Rogers. He should probably be bumped up this list. Will Levis should probably be bumped out of this list, in my opinion. He's at 15. Jackson Dart at 19. And Anthony Richardson at number 20. So, I don't think anybody's arguing the top 3, Bryce Young, or the top 2, rather. Well, really the top 3, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, and Caleb Williams. Okay, those guys are pretty much 1, 2, 3 on every single list, on the Heisman odds, the early favorites, all that and more. Dillon Gabriel, it makes sense reuniting with that offense with Jeff Lebby. What they're trying to do, a variation of that, I guess, at Oklahoma, but those two work together at UCF as well, so that makes a whole lot of sense. KJ Jefferson, Hendon Hooker conversation, we had that. Spencer Rattler's probably a little bit too high. Sam Hartman's probably a little bit too high. Will Rogers should be bumped up. Aiden O'Connell should probably be bumped up as well. He's a little bit better than 16th. And then Quinn Ewers should not be on this list. But isn't that a great conversation to have? Tennessee spent so long, the last couple of seasons, ever since Joshua Dobbs left the program, not knowing who their guy is going to be, not knowing who the quarterback's going to be out of spring camp, not knowing if Jared Garantano is going to lose his job, or if he's going to hang on to it or win his job, or when he did win it, when was he going to get replaced, who's coming up behind him. Was Harrison Bailey going to be the second coming, a 5-star prospect? That didn't work out, obviously. Brian Maurer didn't work out. I mean, all these different guys for the last couple of years. Tennessee has their guy. Thought it was Joe Milton. It was Hendon Hooker. And Hendon Hooker had a fantastic season. 31 passing touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 5 more rushing touchdowns. He threw for almost 3,000 yards, and he didn't start the first couple of games of the season. Completed 68% of his passes, I believe. That's why he should be a dark horse. Dark horse. Again, to call it a dark horse, in my opinion, that means, he's being talked about. He should be on the list, but he's probably not going to win it, right? But he should be in that conversation, that being Hendon Hooker. And how great is that for Tennessee to sit back here and say, all right, we know for a fact we got a quarterback, and he's a pretty daggone good quarterback. That's what Tennessee fans have for at least one more year. And then after that, the conversation continues. Nico Iamaleava, will he be ready to roll? Could it be, a bridge gap type player? Could it be, Taven Jackson to step in there and play a little bit? Could Joe Milton hang around and potentially play that? But nonetheless, Tennessee knows what it has in Hendon Hooker. And let's see if Hendon Hooker takes a step. What kind of season would Hendon Hooker need to have for him to be considered a top 5 quarterback in college football this year? A top 3 quarterback in college football this year? Bryce Young's going to be up there. C.J. Stroud throws it all over the yard. He's going to be up there. Does Caleb Williams adapt well into a new offense? Or not a new offense, rather, because he has Lincoln Riley, but new surroundings and, a new venue and all that type of stuff? How does he adapt? Dylan Gabriel, how does he adapt going from a mid-major up to the Big 12? So I think that'll be something to pay attention to. And can KJ Jefferson stay intact? Man, his body was broken at points and times last year. So it's interesting here. Not a bad list from Brad Crawford, I got to say. Not a bad list at all. And, of course, Hendon Hooker coming in at number 6 overall. 8 quarterbacks from the SEC, over half of the league, is considered in the top 20 quarterbacks entering the 2022 season. So that'll do it here for this conversation on quarterbacks. Tennessee baseball, couple of snubs, but a very, very well-deserving accolade for this team-wide. You got a ton of national awards. We're going to get into all that as we unveil the all-SEC teams coming up here in just a moment on Locked On Vols. Stick around. Back here on Locked On Vols, we're talking Tennessee Vols named All-SEC after a historic regular season, and it was a good showing. I'm Eric Kane back here on the pod. Thanks so much for joining us. Tony Vitello is your SEC Coach of the Year. Well, duh, right? I mean, he won the SEC East by 10 games, wrapped that sucker up about 3 weekends ago, won the overall SEC by 6 games. It wasn't even close. Tennessee, wire to wire, a dominant regular season, and that's where the scares come in. And it was K. Wayne that wrote out to us here about that. If Tennessee is going to struggle in postseason play because it is a new season, would it be because of the bats, or would it be because of these freshman pitchers that Tennessee's relied on so much? To answer your question, K. Wayne, in my opinion, it would be the freshman pitchers because they are throwing so many innings. They've done a nice job, and credit Tony Vitello, the SEC Manager of the Year, Coach of the Year, I guess, for managing that situation the last couple of weekends where you're seeing guys get start skipped, coming out of the bullpen, staying fresh, throwing only 30 to 40 pitches or so. I mean, Drew Beam's a guy that hasn't pitched in 2 years, right? And he's a true freshman, pitching his tail off here in the SEC. You look at a guy like Chase Burns, who is a guy that's been starting every Friday night. So that would be my concern, would be the freshman pitcher, simply because it's a new phase of the season and, you're hitting that little bit of a wall. The bats, you can have a down day and the bats can't come to the ballpark, but, there's so many different options for Tennessee, and that's why they've been so good in that lineup, to where you feel like if somebody's slumping, you can just, sub out, pinch hit, and bring in a guy like Blake Burke or Christian Moore or somebody else, right? So that'd be how I would answer that one as well. Willie wants to know, of course, we're talking Tony Vitello and the SEC Coach of the Year. Tennessee did not have a Player of the Year. Tennessee had a Pitcher of the Year in Chase Dollander. We'll get to that in a moment. Tennessee had a Freshman of the Year in Drew Beam. We'll get to that in a moment. But Tennessee did not have a Player of the Year, SEC Player of the Year, Position Player of the Year, and we thought that it would be Trey Lipscomb, Tennessee's third baseman. And Willie tweeted out to me and said, "I got to know. I mean, what you talk about a snub, right? Why on earth did the SEC go somewhere else?" Well, Tennessee fans, the Battern Syndrome fandom, will say, well, they didn't want Tennessee to sweep the board, being Coach of the Year, Player of the Year, or Coach of the Year, Player of the Year, Pitcher of the Year, and Freshman of the Year. Also, I mean, there's some pretty good other options here. Sonny DeShera, who was named the co-SEC Player of the Year of Auburn, is really, really talented. Dylan Cruz of LSU, the other co-SEC Player of the Year. You look at the batting averages and some of these offensive statistics from around the SEC. Drew Gilbert led the way with batting average in the SEC at 385. Sonny DeShera of Auburn at 382. You have Dylan Cruz at 345 in 13th place. Trey Lipscomb one ahead of him and 12th place at 351. Look at slugging percentage. Sonny DeShera, who's one of those guys that won it, is leading the way. Trey Lipscomb is at number 2. Dylan Cruz is at number 4. On base percentage, you've got Sonny DeShera that leads that one, of course. So, there's no surprise there. Trey Lipscomb's on down the list just a smidge, but runs scored. Trey Lipscomb tied for second with 61. Dylan Cruz just 2 more. Hits on the season. Trey Lipscomb tied for 7th with 74. When the 2 guys that won this award, Dylan Cruz is ahead of him at 2nd, and then Sonny DeShera is right behind him in 5th. You look at runs batted in, RBI. Trey Lipscomb led the way with 74. Dylan Cruz second at 67. And let's see if we can find Sonny DeShera anywhere. He's not in the top 10, I don't believe. Look at home runs. Trey Lipscomb led the way with 21. Dylan Cruz actually tied him with 21, and Sonny DeShera is a couple back at 17. Look at total bases. Trey Lipscomb at 158, Dylan Cruz at 155. So it's not like Sonny DeShera and Dylan Cruz weren't deserving because they're right up there. But Trey Lipscomb is absolutely in this conversation. So snubbed, maybe, but it's not like these 2 guys weren't deserving. That's just kind of my opinion. But nonetheless, what a showing for the University of Tennessee. Tony Vitello, Coach of the Year, no-brainer, right? Chase Dolander, SEC Pitcher of the Year, a newcomer in the SEC. Remember, he pitched as a true freshman for Georgia Southern last year. He's the second player in program history to garner this honor, joining Luke Hochaver, who won the award in 05 and was the number 1 overall draft pick. Dolander was named the SEC Pitcher of the Week twice, including this past week. Led the conference in ERA for starting pitchers at 2.30, opponent batting average at 158, fewest hits allowed at 35, fewest walks at 9. The sophomore right-hander also finished tied for second in the SEC with 8 wins, a perfect 8-0 record in the regular season, 90 strikeouts, led the team, tied for second in the league, and he missed 2 weeks of action due to injuries, so remember that. And then, of course, Drew Beam, one of these freshmen that, if you listen to the Diamond Vols podcast with me and Ben McKee, we're kind of deciphering, what order it would be in Hoover, who would be the odd man left out in terms of a starting pitcher in regional and super regional potentially. And Drew Beam might be that guy, and it's because he's hitting a little bit of a wall, just like Kay Wayne is saying when he wrote into me earlier yesterday. But what a season for Drew Beam. And it's not like he's done. I mean, hopefully he can bounce back and give you some good innings in postseason play because you need everybody, right? But Drew Beam, what an incredible season for a guy, again, that had Tommy John surgery, I believe his senior year, and missed the 2020 season because, of course, it was COVID, right? He hadn't pitched in 2 years. Truly incredible what he's done. And he takes home the SEC Freshman of the Year honors. Held the second lowest whip in the country at 0.84. Held opponents to 184 batting average. Second best mark in the SEC. An 8-1 record. Burst onto the scene, throwing a complete game 2-hit shutout on the road at number 3 Vanderbilt back on April the 3rd. Of course, it earned him numerous Pitcher of the Week honors. He's the first Tennessee player since J.P. Aron-Sebia to win SEC Freshman of the Year. So those are the 3 big awards. Tony Vitello, Coach of the Year, Chase Dolander, Pitcher of the Year, and Drew Beam, Freshman of the Year. First team all-conference, well, Trey Lipscomb's up there because I went over a lot of his stats. Drew Gilbert's led the SEC in batting average. He's pretty much top 5 in everything and on base percentage. He's top 10 in runs scored. He's top 15 in hits. He's top 5 in RBI. He's top 3 in doubles. He is top 10 in home. Actually, he's not top 10 in home runs. Excuse me. Total bases, he's up there. He had a fine season. Did Drew Gilbert, who was also named to the all-defensive team, mind you. So Trey Lipscomb, third base, a first-team All-SECer. Drew Gilbert at the outfield, a first-team All-SECer, and of course Chase Dolander is also gets the first-team nod for what he did, and obviously was being named the SEC Pitcher of the Year. So Chase Burns, second team, also a true freshman. Chase Burns, second team All-SEC. You see here on the season, he had a really nice record. Finished his freshman campaign, 7-1 record, a 2.53 ERA in 14 appearances, 13 of which were weekend starts, the Friday night starter, mind you. His ERA ranked second in the SEC behind Dolander, his teammate, and just ahead of Beam. His 88 strikeouts ranked second on the team and fourth in the league. Burns was named the SEC Freshman of the Week on March 28th and was also named the Golden Spikes Award midseason watch list as well. So what an accomplishment for Chase Burns. He gets second team, and then Drew Beam, of course, who was the freshman of the year, gets named to the second team as well. And then the all-freshman team. A couple of these names, you're racking up the awards, right? So you got Drew Beam, all-freshman, Chase Burns, all-freshman. And then how about Blake Burke, a guy that couldn't find at-bats for the majority of the season? And Tony Vitello on the television broadcast last weekend joked that, hey, Blake Burke would be your starting first baseman this year if not for a 40-year-old man and Luke Lipsius over there, right? The 6-year guy. Blake Burke finally found a spot in this lineup, and he has just made the most of it. Such a sweet, sweet swing. Man, he will be a great one for Tennessee, but already getting recognized. An all-freshman accolade here as a true freshman, and it took him a while just to start finding at-bats. He garnered a spot on the All-SEC freshman team, like I'm saying. Hit .366 on the season, 10 home runs, and just 71 at-bats. 10 home runs and just 71 at-bats. Isn't that crazy? 26 runs scored, or drove in 26 runs, 23 runs scored. Led the team with a 1.375 OPS, 859 slugging percentage, 516 on base percentage. What a season for Blake Burke, though he had minimal opportunities. So really, really fantastic postseason accolades for the Tennessee baseball team, and that's expected. You're the number one team in the country. You ran away with the SEC. You got the best coach in the league, so you're going to have a lot of players racking up these awards, and what a season for Trey Lipscomb. What a season for Drew Gilbert. What a season for Chase Burns, Chase Dollander, Drew Beam, and, of course, Tony Vitello, the undisputed manager of the year. I say manager. It's so weird saying coach of the year. I know coaches in college, but you get the big leagues, you're a manager, right? The undisputed coach of the year in the SEC, Tony Vitello. And now the challenge is here. SEC tournament starts tomorrow on a Wednesday. We'll hopefully catch up with Ben McKee and get a little preview of what's to come this weekend. But the real action, I hate to have this mindset, but I mean, really, what happens in Hoover this week, it doesn't matter at all, right? The real action starts the following either Thursday or Friday when Tennessee will host a regional. So, good regular season for the Tennessee baseball team. Now you flip the page and you do something that's even harder, and you got to survive and advance all the way throughout postseason, hopefully get back to Omaha, and then see what happens. But it all starts this week at Hoover. All right, that's going to do it here for this edition of Locked On Vols. Guys, can't thank you enough for hanging out with me today. You could be doing anything with your time, and I recognize that. So appreciate the comments on YouTube, appreciate the DMs, the tweets. You guys are awesome. Appreciate it. If there's anything you want me to talk about, throw it in there. I've been getting some suggestions, and the slower months are coming up whenever the news is pretty slow. So trust me, I would love any suggestions. If you guys have anything you want me to hit on, just shoot me a DM and let me know. Guys, thank you so much. Give Locked On SEC a try today. And also the Locked On NBA Big Board NBA Draft coming up. Kennedy Chandler coming up. Will he be a lottery pick? Probably not, but a first-team selection. Probably a top 20 pick no matter what. Give the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast a try today. It's on YouTube and, of course, wherever you find your podcast. Make that your second listen right behind your first listen each and every day, which is Locked On Vols. Guys, thanks so much. Until we do it again tomorrow, enjoy the rest of your Tuesday, everybody.